Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Steven Melendez, and I'm going to be bringing you the latest and greatest in soccer news from around the world. Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite soccer podcast. We had an eventful week of, day of Champions League football. We also had a lot of exciting stuff going on in the domestic leagues over the weekend. And of course, the MLS season is pretty much winding down to its finish. So we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. And let's just get right into it with the first segment. We're going to be talking about the Champions League Tuesday matchups, going to be recapping those games. And then, of course, I'm going to give you a quick preview of the Wednesday games if we have time. Second segment, we're going to be talking about the MLS Cup, just previewing those teams, and then, of course, giving you guys a recap of what happened in the semifinals and the conference finals, since I know I haven't been, I actually skipped a day from what I usually do my show. And then segment 3, we're going to be talking about the top 10, I'm getting ahead of myself here, chill, Steve. We're going to talk about the top domestic league games of the weekend. And of course, last, my favorite part of the show, we're going to be talking about the top 10 current Colombia players right now. So let's just get right into it, starting with the Champions League Tuesday recap. We had a lot of interesting things going on. We had a game that was suspended, or it was delayed, because, we'll get into it towards the end of this segment, but we had a lot of things going on in this final game for a lot of these groups, because, we're at the end of the group stage here. So let's just get right into it and start with Borussia Dortmund versus Zenit, with Borussia Dortmund winning 2-1. And in this game, Borussia Dortmund took care of business, winning 2-1, even though it came down to the wire. They didn't have it in the bag until late in this game, and they needed to win. In order to take to take the lead in this group, they needed to see a win, or at least had to take care of business, get your points. Because if they had lost this game, it would have left it in the hands of Lazio and, God forbid, maybe even Club Brugge to, overtake them and give them a chance. But in the end, Dortmund did what they had to do. They won. They got these 2 points, and they got. But they fell down early in this game. Like I said, it was not easy and done for Borussia Dortmund in this game. They fell behind early with a 16th minute go-ahead goal for Zenit, and then it took them until this almost halfway through the second half for them to get their opening goal from Lukas Piszczek in the 68th minute. He got a little tapping goal after there was a little fumbling in front of the Zenit goal. And, they had more possession, not that much more. It was 56% to 44% in favor of Dortmund. The shots, Zenit actually had 3 more shots, even though they had 1 less shot on target. And the pass percentages were pretty even. So this game was honestly pretty even all the way around, and it could have gone either way. Zenit just didn't have many efficient looks in front of goal, while Borussia Dortmund took care of business toward the end. And I'll tell you what, that Axel Witsel goal, I didn't think it had a chance, but it actually sneaked past the Zenit goalkeeper and gave them all 3 points to take the lead in the group and, of course, get them into really good position for the knockout rounds. Next, we have the other game in this group, Lazio versus Club Brugge, and this was a big missed opportunity for Lazio, even though I don't think even if they would have won this game, of course, they would have had 12 points. They would have still been behind Dortmund, so it really didn't matter for Lazio in this game. Of course, for them, though, you want to go into the knockout rounds in, with a good mindset and, of course, in good form. And lose, and I mean, this could pretty much be considered a loss, really, because you draw to Club Brugge 2-2, and it's not like Club Brugge is a bad team. I'm not trying to bash Club Brugge in any way, but they were down a man, Club Brugge, that is, for more than half of this game. They had Eduard Sobol got a red card in the 39th minute. And Lazio were already up 2-1 at this point. They go into the half up 2-1 after getting that penalty for Immobile, and then Joaquin Correa opened up the scoring in this game in the 12th minute. It was answered pretty much right after by Ruud Vormer in the 15th minute, but they didn't do anything in that second. I mean, they of course had more opportunities. They had almost twice as many shots, twice as many shots on target than Club Brugge, but they didn't take advantage of the possession. They only had 52% possession, and when you have a man advantage for that long, and you're the better team, like they have more quality, you need to take advantage of that. I mean, luckily they didn't lose this game, because then they would have been out of the Champions League and gone to the Europa League. That would have been an absolute catastrophe for Lazio after what happened last year in the Europa League. But they were able to hold on, get that 2-2 victory, draw, and they squeak into the knockout rounds. So next we have the shocker with Juventus versus Barcelona. I thought there was really no chance that Juventus were going to lead this group after the way Barcelona were able to play against them, and of course their form in the Champions League up until this point. And I say that specifically because, we'll talk about it later on in one of the segments coming up, but Barcelona have not been doing well in their domestic league, but they've at least taken care of business in the Champions League. But this game is kind of like a culmination of what the Barcelona season has been like so far. You go into this game with a clear lead in the group. You had scored, what was it? I think it was like a 3-1 win over Juventus in their last. Let me just double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was a 2-0 victory over Juventus in the first Champions League game, and Juventus looked like a mess in that one. Of course, they didn't have Cristiano Ronaldo, so that does make a huge difference. He got 2 goals in this one, and let me tell you, that goal from Weston McKennie, the USA international, was just absolutely beautiful. You love to see it, and his form has been great. He's been playing great soccer for Juventus, and that just feels so good as a USA fan. As a USMNT fan, it's just I'm so happy to see him, get minutes and produce in those minutes. And Barcelona had possession. They should have at least had a goal. They had 20 shots, 7 of those on target. And let me tell you, Buffon in between the sticks in favor of Szczesny. Of course, they were probably giving Szczesny some rest due to the abundance of domestic league games put in between these Champions League games, but he came to play, man. He's a legend for a reason, and he played extremely well in this game. But Ronaldo, man, those 2 penalties, puts him home like the legend he is, the prolific goal scorer he is. And Lionel Messi and Griezmann, I don't know, they just couldn't do anything to really stifle Juventus. At least enough to really get by him. And really most of those shots on target kind of felt like they were going straight at Buffon. He did make some pretty spectacular saves, but this was just a terrible night for Barcelona. They lose 3-0 And with that third goal, officially lose on away goals to Juventus, and it's just terrible. I mean, like, you had a clear chance to lead the group. I mean, they still make it into the knockout rounds, and they dominated, Dynamo Kiev and Verench Varus, but, to lose 3-0 to Juventus after, what's been going on in the domestic league, it's just not a good sign whatsoever. Next, we have Chelsea versus Krasnodar, and they, this game didn't really mean anything for Chelsea. I mean, they already had the first place in the group locked for them, so there wasn't really much to fight for here. I guess maybe to at least keep a perfect record of not losing in the group stage. But even with that loss, they would have still gone ahead of Sevilla, because even if they would have been tied in points, they would have been ahead of them in away goals and would have had that lead in the group. But yeah, it's a 1-1 draw. Krasnodar opened up the scoring with a 24th minute goal from Rabbi Cabela, and then Jorginho scored in the 28th minute with a penalty. But Chelsea pretty much had most of the possession in this game, 64% in favor of Chelsea. They had more than twice as many shots. They had 5 shots on target to Krasnodar's 2, and just overall played better than Krasnodar. They just weren't, I guess it just kind of felt like they didn't really have their head in the game here. I mean, honestly, I'm not really surprised, because they obviously have a lot more important Premier League games that they have to focus on, especially since this game didn't matter at all in terms of their placement. They still lead the group and, look really good going into the knockout rounds. Next, we had RB Leipzig shocking Manchester United 3-2. And with that loss, Manchester United have now lost their last 3 games. No, 3 of their last 4 games in the Champions League. It's just a terrible way for them to end their Champions League run, because now with that loss, they now get dropped to the Europa League. I mean, it's really incredible to even think, because they were ahead by a wide margin. They had 9 points, while PSG and RB Leipzig each had 6, and it looked like it was going to be an RB Leipzig PSG battle for who makes it into the Europa League. But in the end, it is Manchester United who absolutely dropped the ball here. And after looking like the best team in the Champions League in this group early on, they're the team that falls into the Europa League. It's incredible. And even if, because we will talk about what happened in the PSG game soon, but even if PSG and Istanbul Basaksehir, even if they lose that game, it won't matter, because they go ahead of Manchester United on away goals. And that's just, honestly, I'm super shocked by that. Super, super shocked by that. It was literally a complete reversal from RB Leipzig and PSG with Manchester United. Both RB Leipzig and PSG have won 3 of their last 4 games in the Champions League, while, like I said, Manchester United lost 3 of their last 4 and have just looked like a shell of themselves from the beginning of this season. It looks like they're bringing in that domestic league form into the Champions League, and now they'll need to go into the Europa League once again and try to make something of this season after what was looking like so promising. It's just incredible. But yeah, they lose 3-2 to RB Leipzig, and this was, it looked like a blowout, because RB Leipzig was up 3-0 from goals from Angelino, Amado Haidara, and Justin Kluivert. They were up 3-0, but then Manchester United were able to make it a bit of a game. Bruno Fernandes penalty in the 80th minute. Pogba scored 2 minutes later to really make it, a threat for RB Leipzig, but after that, they just couldn't find anything else. I mean, it's hard to score 3 goals in the span of 10 minutes, and they just couldn't do it. So, RB Leipzig heading into the knockout rounds. Next, we had Dynamo Kiev versus Verench Varus, and this was a game between 2 teams that to see who was going to make it into the Europa League. And Dynamo Kiev answered that call with a score in the 60th minute to give them that chance in the Europa League, continue their European competition, or their European season. And it could have gone either way. I mean, even though Dynamo Kiev kind of felt like the better team throughout all the games, after they, even though they both lost to Barcelona and Juventus twice, it kind of felt like, it could have gone either way, but Dynamo Kiev seemed like always the better team, and they showed it in this game. Even though they had less possession, they were more efficient with their shots and were able to get the goal and go ahead into the Europa League. Next, we have Sevilla versus Rennes. And in this game, this was also another one of those games where it didn't really matter because we already knew where each team was going to end up in the group stage. In the knockout round, Sevilla had that second place locked. But they still came through with a big-time victory over Rennes, a 3-1 victory. And Rennes just didn't have enough in this game. I mean, we knew, like, probably the number one player for them was Camavinga, and I was hyping him up a lot. But, a team, especially in soccer, is way more than just one player. You need a collection, and they only scored 3 goals in their entire Champions League campaign. That's not going to cut it. And when you combine the fact that they actually had a pretty solid game in this one, I mean, they had almost pretty much equal possession. Their pass percentage was better. They shot the ball way more. They had more than twice as many shots as Sevilla and had more shots on target. They just could not get it past the Sevilla defense and goalkeeper. So it's a tough way to end their Champions League and pretty much European campaign. But that's where it's at. Sevilla get the 3 points and are off into the knockout rounds. And last, we're going to be talking about PSG versus Istanbul Basaksehir here. And I just want to talk real quick. I mean, because if you guys maybe have been living under a rock, you should know that PSG versus Istanbul Basaksehir here was delayed and then suspended because the game, the players walked off the field. They did not want to play because there was an incident between the fourth referee and one of the assistant coaches of Istanbul Basaksehir here. There was obviously probably some, arguments going on for a call that wasn't made. And when the referee was going up to argue it, the referee said the black one there, or something like that. Like he signaled to him as black, and instead of, just saying, oh, that one, him there. And of course, all the players took offense to it because, especially in what's going on. I mean, it's been going on forever, but with what's going on right now with obviously players protesting and kneeling before games, they obviously want their voices to be heard, and that's just not the way you address things like that. I mean, I'm not talking about the players leaving. That I'm in total support of because, attention needs to be brought to this situation right here because a lot of the time it'll just be, it won't even be talked about. It won't even be talked about. But that is not the world we live in anymore. And I love that. And of course, this game is going to be played still. It's probably going to be played tomorrow. I believe that's what I saw in the reports, that this game will be played tomorrow. So we won't know, whether PSG makes it the lead of the group or second. But in the end, I'm just glad they did what they did. Walking off after the fourth official said what he said, it wasn't right to say it that way. And, because if it was a white assistant coach that would have walked up, he wouldn't have said that. He would have just said, oh, that assistant coach right there was the one that, was arguing or whatever. You got to give him a card. And then, of course, the referee even gave him a red card, which, I mean, maybe what he said, what he was arguing about, was bad, and the way he was arguing was bad. Fine, but you still do not address him that way because that's clearly racist, and that cannot happen in this world. It's just not right. So, now that we talked about that, I'm obviously going to be including the PSG Istanbul Basaksehir game in my next show. But now let's talk about the Wednesday matchups, which of course will start with PSG versus Istanbul Basaksehir. Now that I know that Manchester United lost and there's no way that PSG will fall, into the Europa League, I'm obviously way more relieved, and I'm obviously, I'm not as worried anymore. Even if PSG, I do not want PSG to lose, because just like how, Chelsea tied with Krasnodar, you don't want to go into the knockout rounds, drawing or losing to a lesser opponent. You want to take care of business, beat these teams, and keep that good form. And that is exactly what I expect PSG to do here. They probably won't play Neymar or Mbappe, because they'll probably play him in the domestic leagues and then rest them and have some of their other young prospects playing in this game. But I still expect PSG to take care of business, even with Istanbul Basaksehir probably trying to play at their very, very best. I just don't see it being enough to beat PSG. Next, we have Liverpool versus Midtjylland, and there's not much that needs to be said here. Even though Liverpool, already locked as the lead in this group, and Midtjylland have nothing really to play for either. I see Liverpool, taking care of business, even if it is a 1-0 victory. Even though I expect it to be a lot more than that, I see Liverpool, playing a lot of their prospects. Guys like, what was his name? Now that I said what was his name, I gotta look it up. He's one of the young guys. Come on, Steve. Nico Williams. They'll probably use guys like Nico Williams. Who else? I wouldn't be surprised if Adrian gets a look there. Origi might play a little bit. You probably might even see Minamino playing, but just all in all, you're not going to see any of those first team players. You'll see a couple, but for the most part, they'll be rested, especially with the amount of Premier League games that they're playing. But even then, Liverpool will win this game with ease. Now, the next game, Ajax versus Atalanta, that is going to be one to watch, as both these teams are going to be, trying to make it into the knockout rounds. Atalanta just need at least a draw, while Ajax need a win here. And this is going to be extremely exciting. Two teams that, in my opinion, are evenly matched, and I can see this going any way, but I'm just super excited to see which way it goes. But I can easily see this ending in a draw, but I'm mostly leaning towards Atalanta winning and moving on to the knockout rounds. Next, we have Bayern Munich versus Locomotive Moscow, and Bayern Munich have the lead of the group in the bag. They're ahead of Atletico Madrid by 7 points, so there's no problem for them. They're obviously going to rest some of their guys as well, but I don't see Locomotive Moscow, even with Bayern Munich resting their players, being able to win here, even though they've played pretty solid. I have to be honest, Locomotive shouldn't be this slow, and they do have something to play for. they're only behind RB Salzburg by 1 point, and could get a Europa League spot if they are to at least get a win, or to get a win in this game. So they're going to be trying hard, and I feel like this game will probably end in a draw. Next, you have RB Salzburg versus Atletico Madrid, and this game is also going to be one of those games that people are going to keep an eye on. Atletico only needing a draw, while RB Salzburg need that win to get into the knockout rounds. And it can honestly go either way, because RB Salzburg can score, but they can also be scored on. And it depends on what Atletico team comes through. Will it be the one that can defend well but doesn't score at all? Because, 5 goals in 5 matches, that is not good at all. Even though they're dominating in La Liga, they have not been that dominant in the Champions League. So this game can go either way. And I might actually see RB Salzburg getting through, man. Even though I picked Atletico as one of the teams that could win the Champions League this season, they have not shown me, anything that gives me confidence in them. Next, Real Madrid versus Borussia Mönchengladbach, and this is the group that it can literally go any way. The 2 teams on the bottom can go to the knockout rounds. Anybody can make it through here, and I see Real Madrid taking care of business. They seem to be in better form. Even though they lost to Shakhtar Donetsk, it's just incredible what's going on in this group. But I see Real Madrid taking care of business against Borussia Mönchengladbach, and I see the same thing happening between Inter Milan and Shakhtar Donetsk. I see Inter Milan, no longer, thinking, okay, yeah, we're fine. they're going to try their absolute hardest and going to go for the win, and I see them getting that win here against Shakhtar. Manchester City versus Marseille. I mean, Marseille are eyeing for that Europa League spot. Same thing as Olympiacos versus Porto. Man City have that lead in the group locked. I mean, Porto and Man City are locked in their spots, but it's Olympiacos and Marseille. Who's going to get that Europa League spot? I think it's going to be Olympiacos. As much as I would want Marseille, that French team, to get through, I just do not see it happening. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys come back, because when I return, I'm going to be talking about the MLS Cup, previewing that game, and of course talking about the semifinal and conference finals games that occurred.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the Tuesday matchups of the Champions League that have just passed, and of course previewed the Wednesday games that are happening today. And now we're going to be talking about the MLS Cup Playoffs. We already know who's going to be playing in the final, with the Columbus Crew taking on the Seattle Sounders. It's going to be a very, very exciting matchup to watch between two of the best teams in the MLS. And so we're going to be previewing that game. But before we get to that, I want to talk about some of the games that I missed over the past weekend and of course week, with the semifinals and conference finals. So let's just get right into that, starting with the New England Revolution taking on the Orlando City. And New England Revolution, even though they're the 8th seed, took care of business there, defeating Orlando City 3-1, ending their first playoff run in the semifinals. And in this game, I mean, New England just looked comfortable. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Even though Orlando City did have more possession, 62% in favor of Orlando City, it just still felt like New England were much more comfortable in this game. They seemed to get more efficient looks in the final third. I mean, they did get a penalty in the 17th minute that certainly did not help Orlando City. And Carlos Gil, who has been one of the better players in these playoffs, puts it home to make, to open up the scoring for New England. But then Gustavo Bo, another one of New England's best players, scores just not even 10 minutes later to make it 2-0. Luckily for Orlando City, they were able to, at least make it a game in the first half. With a Junior Orso goal in the 33rd minute. But that was as close as they would get. Going into halftime 2-1, of course, Orlando City was trying to press and certainly got more possession. That's how they were able to get a lot of possession. They were, because they were pressing very high. New England Revolution were reluctant to, at least hold on to that lead, especially with Orlando City having a lot of, good attacking players. They needed to play back. And they did so, but still, New England Revolution still looked much more comfortable than Orlando City, because they were playing from behind pretty much this entire game, and they didn't look comfortable with it. They really did not, and it does not help that Orlando City, got a red card in the 60th minute. Mauricio Pereira, it just seemed to all go wrong, because on top of that, of course, I talked about it in the preview of this game. Their goalkeeper, Galesi, and their right back, Ruan just weren't even in this game because of red cards themselves. So they were already playing behind the 8 ball. So to have that early deficit and then lose a player, one of their most important players, that pretty much their playmaker in the middle of the pitch, losing him, it just all seemed to fall apart for Orlando City, and they just could not do anything about it. And then Gustavo Bo made it 3-1 in the 86th minute to shut the gates on Orlando City, and the New England Revolution were heading into the Eastern Conference Finals. Honestly, in this game, I mean, I wasn't really rooting for Orlando City because, of course, I'm an Inter Miami fan. It's that Florida rivalry. But at the same time, you got to love that underdog. I mean, New England Revolution, the 8th seed. I mean, maybe it's got to be different this year because, of course, there's no 2 legs. Or even last year there was no 2 legs. But that's what happens in these single knockout game, tournament style games. It just, anything can happen. And in New England's case, they're able to make it all the way to the conference finals after coming into the playoffs as an 8th seed. It's crazy for them to go from that play-in round against Montreal to now being in the conference finals. It's a huge accomplishment and needs to be understood that, that's just huge. Next, we're going to be talking about the other Eastern Conference semifinal game between the Columbus Crew and Nashville SC. And in my opinion, these were actually the 2 best teams left in the Eastern Conference. I mean, Nashville SC just seemed to play so smart and so in their play style, and I love it. I mean, even though I was always kind of measuring them against us, Inter Miami, the 2 expansion sides, Nashville SC are clearly head and shoulders above them, and that's why they're in the semifinal and Inter Miami are not. I mean, obviously they showed it in the play-in round, but they just did not have enough offensively against the Columbus Crew in this game. And surprisingly enough, the same people that scored against Nashville in the only game they had this season scored against them again in Pedro Santos and Giassi Zardes, and all those were in extra time. So, I mean, Nashville took Columbus to the break. They even had the same amount of shots and shots on target. Possession was pretty even. Columbus had a few more passes here and there, but, I mean, for the most part, this was a very, very close game. I mean, I have to give it to Nashville in making it this tight, because going into the season, nobody would have expected them to be here. I thought they were the worst offensive team in the league, and I mean, they're not far off, but they're so sound defensively and so good in possession that really anything can happen here. And I wouldn't have been surprised if Nashville SC would have moved on to the conference finals, and we would have had a 7th versus 8th seed matchup in the conference finals. I really wouldn't have been surprised. But the star power of Columbus Crew shined in this game. And, I mean, Nagmi played great. I mean, Artur as well. And then Zelarayan as well. They just had all their players step up. And, of course, Pedro Santos and Giassi Zardes get the goal, both pretty in quick succession in the 99th minute and 103rd minute. So it just overall was a solid game from Columbus Crew. Not dominating by any means, but, I mean, you can't really blame them. I mean, Nashville are a very good side and played them extremely well, but Columbus Crew get the win and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now moving on to the Western Conference, we have the Seattle Sounders versus FC Dallas. And in this game, last year's first round matchup between these two teams was absolute fireworks. I mean, what was it? 4-3. Went into extra time. Jordan Morris with the hat trick. It had it all, honestly. But this game was a bit more grounded. I mean, both these teams clearly didn't bring their shooting boots. I mean, they combined for 2 shots on target, and Seattle Sounders had all 2. I mean, it was kind of a tough game to watch, really, even though, the teams had equal possession. No team really, kind of like stood apart from the other. Even though FC Dallas had 10 shots, not a single one was on target. They clearly couldn't get anything going against that back line of Gomez and O'Neal for the Seattle Sounders. And Fry as well. I mean, not that he had to do much in this game, but it's just, I feel like Frey in between the sticks really helps with the back line, stay more organized. But it's all about that front three. I mean, or I guess you can call it front four, but the three attacking players of Lodeiro, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Morris and Rui Diaz. They obviously create a lot of offense for this team, but it just didn't seem to be working in this game. And if there was any game that Seattle Sounders could have lost, it was this one, because their offense was not clicking on all cylinders, but they were able to get that goal from Shane O'Neill, the defender, in the 49th minute and put them ahead. It was a close game, very close game, but not one that that I was expecting. I was expecting far more from both these teams. Especially with FC Dallas having guys like Jara, Hollingshead. Was it Recrete? Man, some of these names are tough, guys. I'm telling you. I mean, you tried doing it. I mean, maybe, man, but with not enough practice on these names, man, it is tough sometimes. But either way, it was a very tight game, and I could have seen this going either way. But the Seattle Sounders were able to hold off FC Dallas and get the victory here. And so then they move on to the conference finals. Next, we have Minnesota United versus Sporting Kansas City. And could this top seeded team of Sporting Kansas City hold off against the underdog Minnesota United and win this game? No, they could not. They actually got blown out, and it was over by halftime. I mean, Sporting Kansas City were down 3-0 heading into the break after a brace from Kevin Molino and another goal from Debasi in the 39th minute. This game was over. And it's not like Minnesota were dominating. I mean, possession was pretty even throughout. I mean, Sporting Kansas City had a few more shots, even though they had less shots on target. It's just... I just expected so much more from Sporting, even though I respect Minnesota United's game, and I saw what they had to offer from even back to the MLS's back tournament. Like I saw their team. Their team was solid, but not this kind of solid. Not to beat one of the best teams in the Western Conference throughout the season and just have them fall apart. I mean, it was extremely surprising to say the least. And, I mean, they got what they needed to get. I mean, in terms of Sporting Kansas City side, Tim Melia just didn't have that same type of magic. Punchek just couldn't keep that back line together. And then, what is it, Johnny Russell, one of the best wingers in the MLS, just couldn't have that same spark that he's had pretty much all season. But on Minnesota United's side, I mean, they did what they had to do. They got those 3 goals in pretty much quick succession. All 3 goals came within 12 minutes in the first half. So they came out firing on all cylinders and had Sporting Kansas City looking, like the 4th seed, while Minnesota United were looking like the top seeded team in the Western Conference. And so they're able to move on to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in their history. Huge accomplishment for Minnesota United. Got to give it to them. While you have those other teams that have all been there, New England Revolution, Columbus Crew, and the Seattle Sounders have all made it to the big stage. And so Minnesota United are the new guys in town. And can they change things up? Can they change the narrative, change the trend? I mean, we'll have to see, because now we're moving on to the conference finals with the Columbus Crew taking on the New England Revolution. And can this underdog story continue? New England Revolution, the 8th-seeded team, taking on the 3rd-seeded Columbus Crew. Can they continue it? They obviously did not. I mean, obviously you guys know Columbus Crew won this game 1-0. But it was close. I mean, New England Revolution were certainly putting pressure on Columbus Crew. They had more possession. Their passing was a little bit better. It wasn't that much better, but for an 8th seed, I mean, the way they were playing, they were using that momentum, even having to play on the road every single game. They were using that underdog mentality to really put pressure on these top seeded teams, but they just couldn't get that go. that goal to really put the absolute pressure on Columbus Crew. However, for Columbus, even though they went into the break tied at 0-0, obviously they probably felt like they should have had a goal in that first half, but they got a goal in the 59th minute from Jose Jr. And even though I'm not going to say his full name is Jose Artur de Lima Jr. So that's a mouthful there, but he scored the opening and only goal in this game to give Columbus Crew that 1-0 victory to send them into the finals. Huge for them. And honestly, it was hard not to see this happening because midway through the season, Columbus Crew were by far the better team. They hit a couple of injury bugs and so obviously, of course, their form fell down. But for the most part, Columbus Crew were one of the better teams throughout this season. Even though they came into the playoffs as the third seed, they were the best third seed in this entire competition. Even though, of course, on the other side you have the Seattle Sounders. You had a lot of good competition. Who else? Who was the third? The Portland Timbers were really good, but Columbus Crew are one of, and with all the teams, with all the players that they have, it's hard not to see Columbus Crew being one of those finalists in this year's MLS Cup. And of course, on the other side, you had the Seattle Sounders taking on the Minnesota United, and this game came down to the wire. And this was probably the best game of the entire MLS Cup playoffs, with Minnesota United taking a 2-0 lead in the second half with a Debasi 67th minute goal, making it 2-0 and making Seattle Sounders look like they were not going to be making it to back-to-back MLS Cup finals. And it's hard to really, to believe it because, they were getting way more shots and they had way more possession for most of this game, especially late. They were putting so much pressure on Minnesota United. It just felt like they were going to break through eventually, and that they did. 8 minutes after going down 2-0, Will Bruin scored in the 75th minute. And of course, at this point, they were just running. They were hoping that they can get another goal to make it 2-2 and send it into extra time. And they got that second goal. Raul Ruiz-Diaz, with the slimmest of angles, was able to put it past who's the Minnesota goalkeeper? St. Clair. Literally, it was such a small angle, but only a top striker like Ruiz-Diaz was going to be able to put that home, and he did just that. And at this point, you're thinking, wow, Seattle Sounders did it. They tied the game up, and now they are heading into extra time where they have the momentum. And Minnesota United are not looking good right now. It's not looking good for them. But no, they weren't going to settle for that. They weren't going to settle for extra time. Literally, the final minute of extra time in the second half, Gustav Svensson scores a 93rd minute header to send the Seattle Sounders into the MLS Cup playoffs, the MLS Cup final for the second straight year. Huge. Just 3 goals in the matter of almost 20 minutes, and literally the final 20 minutes, or I guess I can be more specific, 18 minutes of the game. Just absolutely incredible comeback. If you haven't seen that game, I highly suggest that you guys go see the highlights. It was huge. It was a very, very exciting game. And really, for most of this game, it just felt like Minnesota United were going to be able to do it. They were going to be able to, just complete that underdog story, make it into the MLS Cup final for the first time in their history. But their story ends here with a 3-2 loss to the Seattle Sounders in the Western Conference Finals, and that certainly hurts for them. But they definitely deserve all the praise in the world because they put up a fight. But man, the way that it ends, they're not going to be able to feel anything but just pain for a while, because to just lose in this fashion, it hurts. And especially when 2 of the goals that came were from guys off the bench, it's that also hurts big time. So now we got that MLS Cup final. Columbus Crew versus the Seattle Sounders. And I'll tell you what, this is going into the season, you could have easily seen this as 2 of the best teams in the entire MLS. And it's going to be a very exciting MLS Cup final. I mean, I feel like on the Seattle Sounders side, you have that experience that have been on the big stage and have won it. I mean, they won it last year. So, I mean, obviously, I feel like they're going to go into this game as favorites. While Columbus Crew, they have a lot more youth and players that are, you know, the leaders of this club, but are also, you know, inexperienced in the big stage. You got like Darlington Nagbe, Gyasi Zardes. I mean, Lucas De La Ryan, even though he's, you know, 28, he hasn't really played on the big stage in the MLS yet. Who else? Luis Espinosa. But you got Pedro Santos. I mean, Eloy Room. You got a lot of guys there. Even Jonathan Mensah. Almost that entire starting lineup that doesn't have that experience making to that big stage. But they got the talent. That is undeniable. They have the talent, and they certainly are going to be, you know, extremely strong players in this game. You can't deny it at all. But at the same time, on the other side, it's not surprising that the Sounders are in their 4th MLS Cup final in 5 years. I mean, that's just huge. I mean, that's dominant. This is like officially dominance in the MLS, and the Seattle Sounders have done it with guys like Raul Ruiz-Diaz. I mean, of course, over the last 3 years, Loidero, Jordan Morris, Roldan, Gustav Svensson, Roman Torres. I mean, well, he just recently joined them back from Inter Miami, but I mean, they got players, man. Kevin Leardom, and the list goes on, man. They got Stephen Fry. I can't forget Stephen Fry, one of the better goalkeepers in the MLS right now. And in the end, I feel like the Seattle Sounders are going to end up coming out on top in this game. I just do not see in any way where they lose, because even though Columbus Crew are certainly a very good team, I think the Seattle Sounders just beat them in you know, pretty even in terms of quality, but in terms of experience, I feel like Seattle Sounders just, you know, are head and shoulders above the Columbus Crew, and I feel like that ultimately will win out in this MLS Cup final. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around, because when I come back, I'm going to be talking about the top domestic league games of this past weekend.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the MLS Cup Playoffs. Of course, I talked about the semifinals and conference finals games that I missed since my last episode, and then previewed the MLS Cup final quickly with that game coming up on Saturday. And now we're going to be talking about the top domestic league games of the weekend. I'm talking the most exciting, probably maybe even the most, the ones with the better matchups. We're just going to be talking about all of them from each of the top 5 leagues. starting with the Premier League. And of course, I have to talk about Manchester United as they took on West Ham United this weekend and defeated them 3-1. It was a big time, I guess you would say a test for Manchester United, as even though West Ham United are not a very top team, one of those clubs you expect as one of the top players, in the Premier League, led by, even though Declan Rice, really good defensive midfielder, Mikel Antonio, Syed Benrahma. I mean, they got some players, but they're one of the surprise teams of this early season. But it was still a test because Manchester United have not shown the consistency that you would expect from them after what they showed last season. But with before this one, they only had 5 wins, 5 wins, a draw, and 3 losses. Very inconsistent for them, and they were even on goal differential. So it's just they've looked very inconsistent and just not together at all. Of course, that the inclusion of Edinson Cavani recently certainly helped, even though he did not play in this game because I believe he has an injury now. Oh, no, he did play in this game, so it was after this. I think he might have gotten injured in this game, but still, that certainly has helped because he, the work rate that he has and just, his ability to link up with teammates certainly helps the team in general. But in this game, West Ham United actually got the scoring started with a goal from Thomas Soucek in the 38th minute just before halftime. And they went into the half up 1-0. So, early on in this game, there were obviously question marks for Manchester United, even though they had more possession. They weren't getting as many shots as West Ham, and were just overall not imposing their will into this game. That all changed in the second half. Manchester United took the reins of this game and scored 3 goals in the matter of 13 minutes. The first one from Pogba, then Mason Greenwood joined the party along with Marcus Rashford. And that pretty much put this game to bed because West Ham United just couldn't get a hold of the momentum in this game. Manchester United were just pressing far too high and were just making things tough for West Ham to really find any sort of rhythm late in this game. And they took home all 3 points. And it was 3 points that they certainly needed because when you look at the table, Manchester United are still just in 6th place. They do have a game on each of the teams above them. And of course, they're actually just 1 point ahead of Manchester City with the same amount of games played. So certainly winning the last 4 games has definitely helped. But it should be no surprise that those 4 games have happened with Edinson Cavani on the team. So certainly their form is starting to hit what they were starting to see from last season. And hopefully they can sustain it because they certainly need to make up ground with the top of this league. Because even if they win the next game, they'll have 22 points. That'll still be 2 points behind both Liverpool and Tottenham, which have been leading this field for most of the season. But certainly this 3-1 victory over West Ham United was a great start. And for West Ham, yes, it's a loss that certainly hurts and puts them further back from the top 5. But after wins from against Aston Villa, Sheffield United, Fulham, they finally took on some tough competition. And their last game that they had against tough competition, Liverpool, they only lost 2-1. And then before that, they had a draw against Man City. So really, they haven't been playing too bad against those top competitions. But of course, in this game, Manchester United got the better of them and were able to come out on top. Next, we have Tottenham versus Arsenal, one of the London derbies, and Tottenham come out on top. No surprise here, as Arsenal's form in the Premier League has been absolutely terrible. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games, and that other one was a draw. -4 goal differential has them all the way down at 15th place. They're in the bottom half of the table, and honestly, only 7 points. Even though, they do have some different distance between the relegation. No one expects Arsenal to be relegated. That would be historic. I could already see Arsenal fans rioting outside outside the stadium. But I mean, they're only 7 points away from relegation. They are closer to the top of the table, but still, man, it's just absolutely atrocious what they've been doing as of late in the Premier League. But and on top of that, they actually dominated possession in this game, 70% over Tottenham. But it was the star duo of Song and Harry Kane coming out on top in that first half, getting a goal each. Just before halftime, Harry Kane got that extra time goal, and Arsenal just had no answers. I mean, they had 11 shots, but only 2 of those were on target. I mean, they had way more pass percentage. 86% of their passes were completed compared to 67% for Tottenham, but they just couldn't get by that Tottenham defense and ultimately Hugo Lloris, and all their shots were inefficient. I mean, only 2 shots on target of the 11. It's not something you want to see if you're an Arsenal fan, and just overall, it does not look good for them. Just overall, this season is slipping away, and it's just, I can't really see how they can turn it around. I really, really don't. But so next we have, actually, I didn't realize, because that's pretty much all the exciting games that I saw in the Premier League this week. I mean, you had a couple other ones. Let's see. We had, Liverpool absolutely dominating Wolves 4-0. Southampton keeping up with their, with the top of the table with a 2-1 win over Brighton. Crystal Palace absolutely dominating West Brom for 5-1. But that's no surprise. I mean, West Brom's one of the worst teams in the entire league right now. Chelsea defeating Leeds United. That's a big game there. Chelsea being able to keep up with the top of the table, and Leeds United just continued to flounder in the last couple games. 3 losses in their last 5 games after starting the season off so well. That's kind of a poor sight there. What else? I mean, Everton tying with Burnley. And Man City defeating Fulham. I mean, obviously that Everton draw that does not look good on them, especially after they started the season so well. In their last 5 games, they have 3 losses and a draw and 1 win. It's just not what you want to see, just too many points being dropped. But yeah, that's pretty much all that was going on in the Premier League. I mean, but those 2 games were the 2 I wanted to talk about. Now, in the Bundesliga, I mean, we had some very exciting draws going on, starting with a 1 versus 2 matchup of Bayern Munich versus RB Leipzig. And I mean, this game started off with very, very hot. I mean, you had RB Leipzig opening up the scoring with a 19th minute goal from Nkunku, and then Musiala answers in the 30th minute with Thomas Müller doubling getting the lead for Bayern Munich in the 34th minute. But then Justin Kluivert answers with a goal just 2 minutes later to make it 2-2. So it was just back and forth fire goals, which is what you want to see when you see these top 2 clubs going up against each other. And it went into the half tied at 2. And now, after that, RB Leipzig actually scored just after halftime, with Emil Forsberg scoring in the 48th minute and putting the pressure on Bayern Munich. And they didn't get an answer until the 75th minute, when Thomas Müller got the equalizer to give Bayern Munich at least 1 point in this game and keep them ahead in the table. But man, I'll tell you what, the top of this Bundesliga is so close. I mean, you have Bayern at 1 with 23 points. Leverkusen, after winning this week over, who they end up winning against? Over Schalke, that 3-0 victory for them. They're now in second place with 22 points. RB Leipzig has 21. Dortmund with 19, even though they've been dropping points as of late, which includes this 1-1 draw they had against Frankfurt. I mean, just a ridiculous goal from Giovanni Reina to give them the equalizer in the second half. I mean, the goal was beautiful. To fake out the Frankfurt defender pretty much out of his shoes and then score past Kevin Trapp. It was all just beautiful, and something else that I'm just so happy to see as a USA fan. It's so exciting to see what the future holds for our national team with these guys doing things like this. I mean, I already talked about McKinney and now Giovanni Reina doing this, but after getting that goal, you probably expected Dortmund to come out on top and and right their wrongs. They did not do that. They get a draw and drop more points over the last 4 games. They have 2 losses and a draw. Not what you want to see when you're trying to battle in the Bundesliga. And now they're 4 points away, off pace from Bayern Munich, and they're in 4th place right now, even behind Leverkusen and RB Leipzig. Have not looked good whatsoever. And the same could be said for Borussia Mönchengladbach, who, are certainly playing well in the Champions League, but when you look at what they're doing in the Bundesliga, I mean, they're all the way down in 7th place, and they didn't do any better this week, getting a 2-2 draw against SC Freiburg. And this was the SC Freiburg team that I've expected to see all season long, but it's just that their defense has been so inconsistent. It's pretty much one of the worst in the entire league, and they haven't produced enough offense. I mean, what you usually would expect to see from guys like Niels Peterson, and Vincenzo Grifo, you have just not seen this season. But in this game, they put a lot of pressure on Borussia Mönchengladbach. They had 22 shots to Mönchengladbach's 12. Even though they didn't have as much possession, they were certainly being very, very aggressive, and it got them at least a lead in that second half with a 49th minute penalty for Grifo. But that was very short-lived, as Alessandro Plea got an answer right back in the 50th minute to make it 2-2, and that's where this game would end. But either way, with SC Freiburg, they're going to look at this as a good result. For Mönchengladbach, it's just more, points dropped. I mean, and they're in 7th, tied with Union Berlin for 6th place, 2 points behind Wolfsburg for 5th, and that's 2 draws and a loss in their last 4 games. Not what you want to see for Mönchengladbach. And I didn't even talk about this for Frankfurt, who drew against Dortmund. That's their 7th draw of the season. 7th draw of the season. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight draws in a row. They got a Bayern Munich 5-0 loss after that, and then a Köln draw after. That's got to be so frustrating for fans. I mean, at least they're getting points, so they're 9th place. But man, they got to get some better results there. But now we're going to be moving on to Serie A, where we have Juventus defeating Torino 2-1. And usually you wouldn't really expect this to be one of those top games. But, I mean, you got Torino taking that early lead with a 9th minute goal from Niculo. And after that, I mean, you're probably thinking, can Juventus really lose this game against Torino, who have been one of the worst teams in the league at this point? They only having 1 win in their first 10 games, and they took care of business. Even with, even with Cristiano Ronaldo, they weren't able to really get a goal at all in the first half, going into halftime, down 1-0 to Torino. But then Weston McKennie scores his first goal for Juventus in the 77th minute. And that's 2 goals in this whole show for Weston McKennie. He gets a goal against Barcelona in the Champions League, and now for Juventus in Serie A, just a huge stretch for the young American. And I mean, he just continues to impress Andrea Pirlo, and I'm sure he's just going to continue to use him in his side. Even though he came off the bench in this game, I wouldn't be surprised if he uses him a lot more than he has. And of course, Bonucci scored the game winner in the 89th minute with a header to give Juventus all 3 points. And these were a much needed 3 points because they have been behind the leaders in this season. I mean, they're still behind AC Milan by a wide margin, 6 points already. So they need to rack up these wins. I mean, they have 2 draws in their last 4 games, which for Juventus, that can't really happen, especially when those draws are against Benevento and Lazio. Even though, Lazio's not terrible, but Juventus is much, much better. They need to do more than what they have. It's just not going to cut it for them. So next, we're going to be talking about Roma versus Sassuolo. And this game could be seen as a big-time miss for Sassuolo because You look at the game, and let me go back to it real quick. But Roma picked up a red card in the 40th minute. Pedro got a red card in the 40th minute. That's more than half of the game, and Sasuolo were not able to take advantage. I mean, they still only had one shot on target the entire game. I mean, not like Roma did any better. They had one shot on target as well, but they had 16 shots to Sassuolo's 5. That should not be the case at all when you have a man advantage. I mean, for a team who's been one of the best in this entire league, they've certainly not been looking like it the last 4 games, having 2 draws and a loss in their last 4 games. I mean, certainly dropping points there. That's why they're now in 5th place after being in 2nd for much of the season. And I mean, the top of the table is close. At least, once you if you get rid of AC Milan up there, who's obviously, making a distance from the rest of the pack, you got Inter Milan with 21 points, Napoli and Juventus with 20, Sassuolo with 19, Roma with 18, Lazio with 17. So there is certainly a jam there in that 2 to 6 spot, which with anybody able to go in any direction. But this was an opportunity for Sassuolo, who have dropped points in their last few games to teams like Udinese and Torino, to right their wrongs and get a win against a top club. And they had a big opportunity, a man advantage for most of the game, and they just couldn't do it. So big time missed opportunity for them. So let's just move on now to La Liga, where Barcelona just continue their miserable season, losing to Cadiz 2-1, the newly promoted side. And I mean, I don't even know what to say about them. I mean, just a lapse in judgment from Ter Stegen and just the Barcelona defense, allowing Cadiz to get an easy goal in the 63rd minute to take the lead after Cadiz let them back into the game with a 57th minute own goal. So Cadiz made their own mistakes. I mean, newly promoted side, they're obviously way worse in terms of quality. And when you look at the stats, I mean, Barcelona had 83% possession. I don't even know what I can say here. I mean, and Barcelona had 21 shots to Cadiz's 7, 88% pass percentage to Cadiz's 60%. They had nearly, what was it? That's like almost 7 times as many. No, I'm going too far there. But more than 4 times as many total passes than Cadiz. I mean, they dominated this game, but somehow Cadiz were still able to come on top. And even though I considered Barcelona a title contender, I obviously was talking a lot about, Ronald Koeman coming into the season and making a new system, and of course Lionel Messi and all the problems there. And I talked about it, but maybe I didn't expect it to have this sort of effect on their overall season. I mean, sure, they're heading into the knockout rounds, but after just losing 3-0 to Juventus in the Champions League, the last game of the group stage, to lose out on the lead of the group, it just kind of feels like this season there's going to be nothing good to come out of it. And with this loss, I'm going to tell you right now where Barcelona is in their they're now 9th place. They're in 9th place with 14 points, 12 points behind Atletico Madrid already, with the same amount of games played. I mean, Real Madrid have 1 more game played, and they're ahead of them by 6 points. I mean, obviously Atletico Madrid are absolutely dominating in La Liga, but man, what Barcelona have been doing so far this season just looks incredible. Just terrible in so many different ways. 4 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses, and 2 losses have been in the last 3 games. It's just not looking good for Barcelona. Next, we have Real Madrid versus Sevilla, and Real Madrid got a much needed win there, defeating them 1-0, even though it was off an own goal in the 55th minute, so not dominating by any means. They even had less possession than Sevilla. I mean, obviously, it's incredible to see, because for as long as I've been a soccer fan, Real Madrid and Barcelona have been at the top of the pecking order in terms of just, the best teams in soccer. And that just is not the case anymore. I mean, Real Madrid are no longer dominating their competition, just squeaking by Sevilla with an own goal with their own being their only goal. And I mean, sure, they're still up there. I mean, they with 11 matches played, they have 20 points, but the defense is nowhere near what it was last season, allowing 12 goals in their 11 games. It's a shell of their former selves, and I mean, they're not even scoring as consistent as you would expect. So, but they at least get these 3 points. I mean, that's the name of the game. Get the 3 points and move on. I mean, and play better next game, and that's certainly what Real Madrid need to do. And lastly, we're going to go into Liga and talk about PSG versus Montpellier. PSG got off to a good start in this game, getting a lot more possession, which they usually do in Liga. And Colin Dagba got his first goal for PSG in the 33rd minute. Of course, Neymar and Mbappe didn't start in this game. Mbappe coming off the bench and scoring his 100th goal for PSG in extra time. And Moise Kean just continues his hot start for Paris. I mean, he's just been in such great form and is easily one of the early signs of this best signs of the season. And I mean, just overall, just a simple game for PSG, taking care of business. Even though Montpellier did make it a game in the 41st minute, getting an equalizer, which looked like it was saved by Keylor Navas. But when they went to VAR, they saw that it had just passed over the line when he saved it. So they were able to get that equalizer just before going into halftime. But PSG took care of business, got their 2 goals in the second half, making it 3-1 and getting 3 points. And they obviously still lead in the table. But it's not by as much as you would expect. I mean, they have a 2-point lead over Lille and over Lyon, 4-point lead over Marseille. Obviously, this loss from Montpellier drops them down to 6th place, but they still have 23 points. So this is still a very competitive season right now in Liga, but at the moment PSG lead and have, been looking very good. And of course now they just need to go into the knockout rounds and prove that they are not just a one-year fluke in that season. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around, because when I come back, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 current Colombia players right now.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, everyone. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the top domestic league games of this past weekend. Just, of course, give you a little quick overview of how each team did and where they now are in the table. But now we're going to be talking about the top 10 current Colombia players right now. Like I've been doing over the past couple shows, we're going through each of the top 20 countries in the world and talking about their top 10 players at the current moment. And now we're at, I believe it is 15th best country in the world, and that is Colombia. So we're going to be talking about their top players. And now we're going to be starting it off with number 10, Yerry Mina, the 26-year-old center back from Everton. You look at his stats, 160 matches played, 150 starts to go with 21 goals and 3 assists. And for country, he's got 24 caps, 22 starts, and 6 goals. Now, honestly, I was close to even leaving Yerry Mina off of this list, but which is super surprising because a couple years ago, you would have easily put him in the top 5 or at least close to it. but he has certainly fallen off since those days of, being one of the highly touted transfer market targets. He was in Barcelona and big things were expected from him, but certainly things have changed since then. And he's failed to make a lasting impact at Everton after failing at Barcelona. But when you look at the player, he's extremely tall. He's at about 6'5", and he's certainly not the quickest defender, but his size gives him a huge advantage in the air pretty much every single time, which is where he usually gets his goals, off headers, off corner kicks, and dead ball situations. He's also very strong, which allows him to win most of those battles for the ball that don't require a lot of agility, because he definitely does not have that. And usually the problem with him is that he just has a lot of inconsistency on the pitch. He doesn't seem to always have his head in the game, and it just makes a lot of mistakes that you just can't get from your defender. But he also is very good with his tackles. It's just like it depends on what Yerry Mina you're going to get, but he certainly still has a lot of talent. He's still, young, almost reaching his prime. So, and he's going to be one of the more important players for Colombia's backline. And that's why he comes in at number 10. At number 9, we have Alfredo Morelos, 24-year-old center forward from the Rangers. Club stats, he has 169 matches played, 141 starts to go with 84 goals and 18 assists. And for Colombia, he has not played that much. He's only had 7 caps and 4 starts to go with 1 goal. And a lot of that has to do with, the amount of strikers that you have ahead of him. However, at just 24 years old, I could definitely see Morelos being, that future striker for the Colombian national team, because he is a prolific goal scorer. He can score in pretty much any way you can ask. He also has that acceleration, strength, and balance to hold on to the ball and use his body extremely well to make sure he keeps it. He's also a good dribbler. He can get by a lot of players with ease and with good technical ability, and he's got good IQ. He gets to those spots that you want to see strikers getting to open up passing lanes and getting easy scores. He certainly does that a lot, and he has a very good work rate as well. Always fighting back to get the ball once it's lost possession, and he never seems to have any sort of quit. He kind of reminds me a bit of Cavani, obviously not in that same type of skill and quality, but in terms of just his work rate and just what he does overall for his team, he certainly reminds me of Cavani-like. But he's still just at number 9. Doesn't get a lot of playing time for Colombia, but I certainly see that changing in the future. But especially since he's only 24 years old. Next, at number 8, we have Wilmar Barrios, the 27-year-old defensive midfielder from Zenit. He's got 177 matches played and 167 starts to go with 6 goals and 5 assists for club. And for Colombia, he's got 29 caps and 20 starts. And for Barrios, I believe he's just such a sound defender. Knows when to make a tackle, whether it's sliding or standing. He's got an excellent IQ, is always in the right position. Usually will be helping out with that back line, as he is, his main strengths are in defense. Though he can also have the ball at his feet, has good composure, and is able to, to make those forward passes. Won't usually go ahead and help in the attack. He's more of like a deep-lying playmaker, though he doesn't have incredible passing abilities, but he can certainly make those forward passes and make a few passes that change the direction of play. He does have some good speed and overall acceleration. And he is very athletic as well, and he does know how to use his body extremely well to ward off those defenders that are trying to take the ball away from him, which I feel is extremely important for any player. And at 27 years old, he is in his prime and is going to be one of the more important players for Colombia in their midfield. Next, we have another very important midfielder for Colombia. Number 7, Jefferson Lerma, 26-year-old defensive midfielder from Bournemouth. And really the only reason I put Jefferson Lerma ahead of Barrios is because I feel like he's much more versatile. He can help in the attack while also being an anchor in defense. I mean, he's a solid passer and goal scorer. Has absolutely no fear in him in making some of those forward passes to get his attackers in the right position. He's also a very strong player and keeps his balance very well when he has the ball at his feet. It doesn't matter if he's pressured, he's able to hold onto it and make sure that he picks out the right pass. Somehow he doesn't get a lot of time with the Colombian side. I mean, he's got 19 caps, 9 starts with just 1 assist. And for club, I forgot to say this, but he has 194 matches played, 170 starts to go with 10 goals and 7 assists. But usually he's seen as a deep-lying playmaker, though he can obviously, like I said, help out in the attack. He has a very, very high work rate, is excellent in the air, and has some decent ball control. Can certainly, play with the ball at his feet, and has that composure that when things get a little hairy, he can always pick out the right pass. So just that versatility makes me have to pick Lerma ahead of Barrios, but it's very, very close. Also, the fact that he's a 1 year younger, I mean, just kind of maybe edged my vote there a little bit. Now, at number 6, we have Luis Muriel, the 29-year-old center forward from Atalanta, and he's got 310 matches played, 189 starts to go with 90 goals and 37 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 29 caps, 16 starts to go with 4 goals and 2 assists. And for Luis Muriel, I mean, he is just a dynamite goal scorer, can score in so many different ways, whether it's dead ball situations, inside the box, outside the box, one-on-one situations. I mean, you name it, Luis Muriel can do it. And I mean, ever since he's joined Atalanta, he's been terrorizing Serie A for years now, but with Atalanta, he is just taking it to another level because, I mean, he's mainly been playing off the bench. But even last season, even with him only getting it was 19 starts, but he had 41 appearances. He had 19 goals in all competitions, which I just think is incredible because it cannot be easy to just enter a game that's already been going and just, have to, muster up a goal or just, change the game. He's that spark plug that you have off the bench, and that's also kind of how Colombia uses him because, of course, we have a couple center forwards that are up ahead in this list, which is why when you look at his Colombia stats, he's only got 21 caps and 16 starts. So, they kind of use him in that same way, but I mean, his technical skills are top notch. Lets him get pretty much anywhere he wants, and his speed and acceleration are very good as well. And his balance is also very solid. I mean, it takes a lot to get him off the ball, and if if he opens up the space, he's a very willing passer and is able to make those forward passes to players making runs into the box. And he can defense cutting passes. I'm talking when I was looking at those highlights, it's like he has no problem cutting it between 3-4 defenders to find a player rushing into the box. So I mean, Luis Muriel, one of the better Colombian players right now, and that's why he comes in at number 6. And honestly, I was so close to putting number 5th, and I could probably switch him, but I mean, I already made the list. So at number 5, we have Davidson Sanchez, the 24-year-old center back from Tottenham. He's got 201 matches played, 187 starts to go with 8 goals and 3 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 29 caps and 29 starts. Now, he is not doing so well at Tottenham at the moment, and since arriving 3 years ago, has not been able to provide much consistency for the club. It's pretty much the same thing as Yerry Mina, yet Davinson Sanchez has so much more potential than Yerry Mina, because I mean he's just like Mina. Davinson Sanchez is very tall and strong, but he's also super athletic for his size. He's excellent in the air, knows how to use his body to shield off attackers and get control of the ball. And he's one of those rare defenders that is solid on the defensive end while also being able to play composed with the ball at his feet. And he's also an excellent passer for a defender. I mean, he can make those forward passes, knows how to change the direction of play. You know, when things get a little bit too just pressured up on the team. I don't know what the word of that is. I believe I'm saying change the direction of play, but I know there's another word that I can use to say that. But still, Davidson Sanchez has that potential. He can be one of the best defenders in the world, but there's just so many times when he just takes a game off and he just doesn't have his head in the game and just has so many inconsistent moments. That you just cannot have from a defender. It's so similar to Yerry Mina, but the reason he makes it this much higher up on the list is because he just has so much more potential. And at just 24 years old, he's still very young, for a soccer player, and can definitely become one of the better defenders. He just needs to, maybe he needs to find a different, scenery and because he's certainly getting time, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to hold on to those spots very much longer. Now at number 4, we have Juan Cuadrado, 32-year-old right back from Juventus. He's got 360 matches played, 274 starts to go with 43 goals and 59 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 65 caps, 57 starts, 4 goals, and 13 assists. Now, Juan Cuadrado, when I first started watching soccer, he was a winger. He was playing up very often, and it's no surprise with his amazing technical abilities, his quickness. He's a very good scorer and overall passer. It's no surprise that he was being played higher up. However, he is such a versatile player that he has converted himself into a fullback. And obviously he's mainly an attacking fullback, but it's just incredible for him to be able to do that in his career. You don't really see that often for someone to convert their position after playing as an attacker for so long. He moves back as a defender, and he's been playing it extremely well. He's got a very high work rate, even though he mainly is used in the attack. He's got incredible dribbling ability, can make guys look silly. And he's very quick. He's got great agility, and he's an excellent goal scorer. That needs to be said. He can score with the best of them, and and he's one of the better passers in Colombia. Really, he's an excellent crosser and just overall passer. Can make a lot of different passes, and he's just such a great player for Colombia, and that's why he comes in at number 4. At number 3 now, we have Radamel Falcao, one of the legendary Colombian players, one of the best strikers in the world, especially in his prime, and he's easily one of the greatest strikers Colombia has ever had. And he can score with the best of them, even now, even though he is past his prime. Radamel Falcao can still score with the best of them, and that's why he's used so much for the Colombian national team. But when you look at his stats, he's got 359 matches played, 305 starts to go with 225 goals and 28 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 44 matches, 44 caps, 35 starts to go with 15 goals and 1 assist. Now, one of the things that is incredible about Falcao is the fact that he's able to make something out of nothing in so many different situations. And where you don't really expect a goal to come, Falcao is able to make it happen. And that's why he's a legend for Colombia and really in the game of soccer. If it hadn't been for those injuries that occurred midway through his career, and honestly pretty much throughout his entire career, he could have gone down as one of the greatest strikers of all time. And for him at 34 years old to be considered still one of the best Colombia players ever, not of all time, just right now of current players, is a huge accomplishment and certainly is deserving. And that's why Radamel Falcao comes in at number 3. And while he's not the best passer, he's certainly great at linking up with teammates. Similar to, I know I'm using Cavani very often now, but similar to Cavani, who is a very willing passer he's good at linking up with teammates, but most often it's to get him the better opportunities to score because, man, you get him an opportunity anywhere near the box, and he more often than not will score. Maybe not anymore because, since he's getting up there in age, he doesn't have that same athleticism to just get by opponents, which is where he uses the link-up play even more than he did before. But still, Radamel Falcao is one of the better strikers of all time and is number 3 on this list. Next, we have Duvon Sapata at number 2. Might be a surprise for some of you, but honestly, in my opinion, I consider him the second best Colombian player right now. The 29-year-old center forward from Atalanta. You look at his club stats, he has 237 matches played, 171 starts, to go with 95 goals and 30 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 16 caps, 7 starts, to go with 3 goals and 2 assists. Now, I understand he's not used very often for the national team, pretty much for the same reason why guys like Muriel and who was the other one? And Morelos is not used, because of course Radamel Falcao is used very often there. The Colombian national team manager prefers to use him, which is fine. But I feel like Duvon Sapata is eventually going to start. Which he has. He has been playing more for the Colombians, for the national team, and it's just the fact that he works so well in a team unit. He's quick. He has a very big body frame. He's strong, so he's able to ward off defenders, and he's a prolific goal scorer. 95 club goals in 237 matches played, and on top of that, 30 assists. He's already got more career assists than Radamel Falcao in more than 100 less games. So, he's certainly a much better passer, and is just able to play in any position on the front line. That's another reason why I feel like he's so great. His versatility is, one of the best in this entire in this entire list, and certainly deserves to be considered one of the best Colombian players of right now, and in my opinion is the second best Colombian player. And then of course last, if anybody expected anyone different, you've been living under a rock, but it's James Rodriguez, 29-year-old attacking midfielder from Everton. Club stats, he has 323 matches played, 248 starts, to go with 91 goals and 102 assists. And for Colombia, he's got 62 caps, 56 starts, to go with 18 goals and 22 assists. Just an absolute superstar of the game. Of course, after breaking out with Colombia in the World Cup at age 22, I still remember that goal he had that he didn't even let it touch the ground, off the chest. It was a Puskás goal. It won the Puskás award. Enough said there. But just James Rodriguez is one of those just versatile, just all around attacking players that can pretty much lead a team, in my opinion. He's got that kind of skill set. He's an excellent passer. You look at those 102 assists, 124 total career assists right now. That shouldn't be a surprise, but yeah, James Rodriguez is just an absolute superstar of the game, and he's also, aside from him being able to pretty much being the best playmaker on this list and in Colombia as a whole, he's also able to get those wonder goals from outside the box. He doesn't really do a lot of work from inside the box. He's mainly, that outside the box wonder goal type of player, but still, James Rodriguez just pretty much does it all for Colombia, is that engine of the offense. Hasn't really been that lately for the national team. He's been a little bit inconsistent for them, but if they want to go anywhere, especially in the World Cup and these qualifiers, they're going to need James Rodriguez to be the guy for them. If he isn't, obviously they're not going to be as good as they, want to be, and as good as they should be. So James Rodriguez comes in at number 1 and is the greatest Colombian player playing right now, and already considered one of the best Colombian players of all time. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. As always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would really appreciate it. Thank you and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.